Recording in progress.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Maura Noone, and I'm a student of Henry Schuckman's. I've also done some training with Valerie Forstman, and I just want to thank my teachers, first of all, most importantly. And I also want to thank Yamada Roshi, the abbot of Sambo Zen. A little over a year ago, Henry asked me if I would consider giving another talk, and he suggested that I write it out instead of using just an outline. So this is a little new for me. It was an interesting experience to trust, and I'm always saying that to people because I need to hear it myself. Trust what's happening, trust life, trust yourself, and I think it's important to mention that at that time, I had just finished a round of chemotherapy to try to halt the progression of a kidney disease, and it did not work. And that December of 2020, I started dialysis because my kidneys were failing, had failed. And I mention this because I wouldn't change a word of what I said. I did not know at that point that I would be in end of life care in a few months. And uh, this unconditional boundlessness, boundless love, original love, to use Henry's words, is unconditional. And I really wanted to start by saying that. This talk I wrote is called Freedom. During an online retreat, a participant asked the following question: what is the difference between desire and aspiration? Henry had just given a talk about the 5 hindrances: desire, aversion, sloth or torpor, restlessness or worry, and doubt. At this moment, I was sitting inside an intense migraine and various other physical issues related to my kidneys and immune system and a brain and ear injury. And I was experiencing a great desire for this pain to go away, then the desire to somehow fix it, cascading into essentially the desire for everything to be different than it is. Fortunately, I have been graced with the gift of this practice and the gift of having a guide. And I became aware of these desires, and the allowing muscle kicked in. And I focused right on the pain. Where is it? What hurts more? My head and body, or my heart in its desire for the pain to go away, for everything to be different? Stunningly quickly, one awareness and its power seems to reveal itself, holding all of it. And there's no longer a problem, no longer anything to fix, and nothing to change. My job is to welcome the desire for everything to be different, to love the pain, to make space for it all. This space, this stillness, this awareness, this silence, this love, this compassion, this gratitude, this dissolves everything. There is nothing to fix. How freeing. As Dogen said, quote, utterly free and untrammeled, end quote. Sometimes I just can't believe this is possible, but this practice is not about believing. It's about experiencing. And it's true, it is possible. It is constantly showing itself. It is never not here. It is you. each of you, all things. A few synonyms for untrammeled are unconstrained, unrestricted, untamed. This is you. My sixth grade teacher, Mr. Vogel, would often lead us in a dictionary game. Each of us had a dictionary on our desk. Mr. Vogel would write a word on the blackboard, and the first person to find the word would raise their hand and read the definition. It was so much fun. It sparked a lifelong curiosity in me. My little 11-year-old brain decided that whatever I needed to know, I could find. I could look it up. I thought the dictionary was the answer, but it did not teach me how to be a human being. I still love dictionaries, and I still love to look things up. This is a great joy. This is not a problem, nor is it in conflict with the experience of the fundamental fact of this reality. It is exactly this. I can love words, and I can also put them aside. Knowledge was never going to satisfy the longings of my beingness. In case 32 from The Gateless Gate, a non-Buddhist says to Buddha, I do not ask about words. I do not ask about no words. In the Teisho on this case by Kon Yamada, he states that the person was most likely a philosopher, and that what he was asking Buddha is, quote, please teach me the absolute reality that transcends both of these, end quote. He is asking what transcends being and non-being. I would offer that this person's question, in the form of a statement, points to a deep seeking, and it is not in conflict with his pursuit of knowledge as a philosopher. In the koan, it states that the Buddha, in response, just sat still. He just sat still. He is teaching us right now, here, as we sit still. In Zen, 4 zones of aspiration are described. This philosopher's question seems to encapsulate the 4th zone, the aspiration to discover what he truly is, the nature of reality. The first zone would describe my own arrival at a Zen center for the first time. Quote, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm here, end quote. The second zone might be, quote, I just want to feel better in my mind, heart, and body, end quote. The third zone, quote, I want to discover the way of Buddha, end quote. So back to the question, what is the difference between desire and aspiration? I looked it up. The definition of aspiration from my shorter Oxford English Dictionary that a friend gave me, published in 1933, states from aspire, 1, inspiration, 2, the action of breathing, a breath, sigh. In technical use, the drawing in of air in or as in breathing. 3, the action of aspiring, steadfast desire for something above one. First, inspiration, a word. One definition of inspiration is a breathing into or infusion into the mind or soul, end quote. To have an aspiration in this sense is very expansive and heart-opening. It's exciting. It is fiery and alive and full of passion and compassion. What is the mind? What is the soul? Who am I? What is all this? How can I help? In a presumably more mundane zone, using this Maura as an example, I would say that one thing I aspire to is to feel as well as I can in my body and my heart, in spite of anything that's going on in either. The key difference for me between this aspiration and the desire in a moment for things to be different than they are, for the pain to go away, for example, is that it's unconditional. In the space of desire, it feels like an imperative. I must not have this. I must have that. An aspiration is much less defined, much more open and spacious. I cannot know what is going to happen in at any moment. Allowing or welcoming acceptance is not complacency or resignation. It is alive and active. It is an open space of infinite potential. To have whatever procedure is needed, to follow any diets required, to tend to my emotional health, and ask for help where needed with a great amount of dedication and determination is called for. But there is no longer concern with outcome in this space of aspiration. It is unconditional. If my entire body starts to fail, this is okay. Right now, this moment is all there is. There is nothing mundane in this fact. It is wondrous, and it has most definitely not always felt wondrous. It is this practice that has cultivated the space for allowing and the space for joyful and free aspirations, to be inspired regardless of conditions. The second definition of aspiration, quote, the action of breathing. What is breathing? We know technically what breathing is, but to discover what one breath truly is can resolve everything. During a session, I was in line for Dokusan, and the mats were quite close. The person in front of me was not audibly breathing, but I could see the back and shoulders expanding and contracting with the breath. It was very clear. The breath in this person's body was no different than the breath in my body. One breath. Nothing else, not even a body. This experience was not to be found in a dictionary. It was a moment that is this moment. It was not a Kensho experience, but it was a moment that is the essence of every moment. One breath. According to the third definition, aspiration is a, quote, steadfast desire, end quote. This made me laugh. As Yamada Roshi said, no separation, no exception. Aspiration is desire. What is a word? Siddhartha Gautama, who was to become the Buddha, left his palace as a young man and witnessed for the first time an old human being, a sick human being, a dead human being. This is the deal. This is being a human. Aging, illness, and death are certain. We are now benefiting from his or her search to resolve suffering, and she discovered that the resolution of suffering is suffering itself. When there is no separation from suffering, when there is only suffering, there is no longer a need to resolve suffering because there is no one to resolve it. Maybe letting it all be is an aspiration, allowing the suffering in our bodies to just be. Once again, this is the opposite of complacency. Action will naturally follow. It is a natural flower from the cultivation of allowing. There is movement toward helping all. If you have an aspiration, whatever it may be, welcome it. Even if you are not curious about the deeper questions, the quote unquote deeper questions, like, who am I? That's great. That's no problem. Maybe your aspiration is just to sit for 5 minutes each day and let it all be. No fixing for 5 minutes. No fixing anything. As we cultivate the soil in the garden, the plants grow. It's like magic. No one would ever dream of yelling at a tomato plant, make a tomato, make a tomato. We tend the plant and let it do its thing, and if there is no tomato, this is okay. And the plant is still benefiting from the lovingly tended soil, and it is still a tomato plant. I remember a moment in our garden in Mountain Cloud, looking at a tomato plant that wasn't producing tomatoes and thinking of this. Treat yourself with the same acceptance. Cultivate the space of allowing. Allow it all to be just as it is. Use all the cultivating present moment awareness tools at your disposal, whatever seems the most natural go-to in the moment. This path, this practice, this life as a human being is not a linear process. The growth of a plant is quite linear. The growth of a human being actually becoming a human being is not. We can allow for this as well. Forget about the markers and the gauges, the signposts, the lab results, all the things we think are telling us who we are, and just sit down. Dive into practice wherever you are, not where you want to be. To simply allow things to be as they are, no exceptions, can be tremendously freeing. The Iggy Pop song, The Passenger, comes to mind. I am the passenger, and I ride and I ride. That's the line. There are no surefire 5 steps to inner peace. This is an individual journey. You are your own guru. I recently saw a description of a PBS show that read, "So-and-so presents a simple 3-step process that makes happiness, joy, and energy attainable." Maybe joy is not attainable. It is already right here, and we just have to get out of the way. Master Mumon, who was sitting in silent meditation, was asked what he was doing to help with a particular situation, and he said, quote, "I'm busy, not influencing anything," end quote. The intention to sit regularly is simple, but simple is not necessarily easy. There is nowhere to hide. It can be challenging. When there is more to occupy the brain and the senses, we can avoid. When we sit with what is, and what is painful, it does take trust and determination to stick with it, to stay with it. It is worth it to practicing, to keep at it, just as you would if you were determined to learn any body practice like yoga or rock climbing. After some time, the body and all the brain's activity can begin to dissolve more and more into the stillness. You may discover that there is only stillness. I mentioned physical pain at the start of this talk. I'd like to talk a bit about emotional pain. Often the line between emotional and physical pain is blurry, if there is one at all. Pain might suffice to cover both. There is a great deal of pain in trying to fix the unfixable, and a great deal of freedom and joy in becoming aware of this. A few years ago, a friend gave me a book to read called Trauma and Recovery by Dr. Judith Herman. I recognized myself immediately, and at times while voraciously reading, I thought, wow, I'm in trouble. I am unfixable. I no longer feel as if I'm in trouble and swallowed up by the experience of the essential reality. Truly, truly, there is nothing to fix. More and more, it is clear that all people in varying degrees carry the scars of trauma. How else can you explain how a man can put his foot on the neck of another man until his breathing stops? I have a hard time saying these words. One of the side effects of this practice seems to be that as the heart opens more and more, it is impossible to numbly bypass the heartbreaking behavior of humans toward each other, toward the earth, and all of its creatures. Bruce Springsteen sings in the song Badlands, "Let the broken hearts stand as the price you gotta pay." My friend pointed out the most important sentence in this book, which is, quote, "It cannot be reiterated too often. No one can face trauma alone," end quote. I decided at a very young age that I needed to be alone in order to be safe. To not do it alone and to help others to not do it alone. Maybe this is an aspiration. Courage is particularly needed if we have an aspiration to grow as a human being, to heal on many levels, particularly when we suddenly feel stuck in the muck again and it feels like nothing has changed. Allowing this just to be, to just sit in the muck and not try to change it, can be the most healing time of all, particularly during a session or a longer sit. Somehow things shift by just allowing ourselves to be in the muck. This is one of the gifts of sitting together for multiple consecutive periods in one day or multiple days. We can really investigate what is. Dive right into the center of whatever is arising. If it is a pain, physical or emotional, it can be softer, more fluid as we let the current take us. And we may experience the fact that it is not about transcending the body. It is this body, as is, no changes. Becoming more aware of how the many traumas in my life, physical and emotional, have shaped me, to be able to name them has helped tremendously. But nothing has helped more than just sitting with these events as they arise, letting them be and not trying to push them away or fix anything, giving them all space and compassion. There is an element of surrender here, surrender with support. I have given up the fixing, the anticipating, and essentially worrying that I must be different than I am. With courage and help and inspiration, healing and change can creep in because now there is space. No need to be fixed, not fundamentally flawed, not ashamed for having challenges. A few more lines from Badlands, Bruce, came to mind. Talk about a dream. Try to make it real. You wake up in the night with a fear so real. You spend your life waiting for a moment that just don't come. Well, don't waste your time waiting. Don't waste your time waiting for things to be different than they are. Maybe it is helpful to forget about all your aspirations when you are sitting. Stay with your practice, whatever it may be. Allow this time, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, to be free and untrammeled. Ultimately, there is no need to aspire to be anything other than what you already are in this very moment. You are already it. I've mentioned two friends and two teachers in this talk. We can also allow support not just from people, but from our practice, from the act of sitting, from stillness, and from all things, the cushion, the mat, the light, the bell, the tree, the bird, the breath, the plant, the IV needle, the hospital bed, even migraine pain. I happened to hear the Cat Stevens song On the Road to Find Out while happily vacuuming recently. One of the lines is, I listened to the Robin song, saying not to worry. Saying not to worry. Worry has many faces. It's wonderful to have aspirations, but there is no need to worry about them. Just stop and sit. Watch for the musts and the shoulds. Sit and breathe and allow everything space. The musts and the shoulds tend to be constricting. And this practice cultivates a feeling of open-hearted expansion. As Dogen said, the Dharma gate of joyful ease. Here is an excerpt from Dogen's universally recommended instructions for Zazen, translated by the Soto Zen Text Project. Quote, the Zazen I speak of is not meditation practice. It is simply the Dharma gate of joyful ease, the practice realization of totally culminated enlightenment. It is the koan realized. Traps and snares can never reach it. If you grasp the point, you are like a dragon gaining the water, like a tiger taking to the mountains. For you must know that the true Dharma appears of itself, so that from the start, dullness and distraction are struck aside. This being the case, intelligence or lack of it is not an issue. Make no distinction between the dull and the sharp-witted. If you concentrate your effort single-mindedly, that in itself is wholeheartedly engaging the way. Practice realization is naturally undefiled. Going forward is, after all, an everyday affair. End quote. An everyday affair. I'm going to close with to reach satisfaction in all, verses from St. John of the Cross. I first heard this from our sutra book at the Zen Center. His dates are 1542 to 1591. He was a Carmelite priest and has been described as one of the greatest Christian mystics and Spanish poets. To reach satisfaction in all, desire its possession in nothing. To come to the knowledge of all, desire the knowledge of nothing. To come to possess all, desire to possess nothing. To arrive at being all, desire to be nothing. To come to the pleasure you have not, you must go by a way in which you enjoy not. To come to the knowledge you have not, you must go by a way in which you know not. To come to the possession you have not, you must go by a way in which you possess not. To come to what you are not, you must go by a way in which you are not. When you turn towards something, you cease to cast yourself upon the all. For to go from the all to the all, you must leave yourself in all. And when you come to the possession of all, you must possess it without wanting anything. In this nakedness, the spirit finds its rest. For when it desires nothing, nothing raises it up and nothing weighs it down, because it is in the center of its humility. Thank you for listening. Be like a tiger taking to the mountain. Ah! Thank you.